Now, while you can't play fetch or play directly with your chameleon, you can, however, provide them different enrichment opportunities. So I'm going to be giving you guys 3 things that you can do with your chameleon. Now, none of these things are things you absolutely have to do for your chameleon, but I think it's a fun way to kind of provide enrichment and maybe bond with your chameleon and kind of just enhance their quality of life and give them something kind of fun to do. So the first one is going to be free ranging your chameleon, which is taking your chameleon outside of their enclosure to kind of explore. There's a couple caveats with this. One, you have to be able to get your chameleon in and out of their enclosure, going both ways, which takes a lot of time to build that trust with your chameleon, and some chameleons are just too scared of us to be able to do that in the first place. So you need to use your best judgment to decide whether or not this makes sense for your chameleon. But what you can do is put them onto a plant or a tree. I have a fake tree from Home Goods that I use for my chameleons, and they absolutely love it. So that's great because it's very little interaction with me, right? They just come onto my arm, and then they go onto the tree, And that's the extent of my interaction. It's low stress, low involvement. You know, the chameleon can kind of explore around the tree in a safe, supervised area. Now, what you want to avoid doing is letting your chameleon have access to parts of the home or your room or wherever where you would be unable to reach them. The last thing I would want is for you to have to watch my video of help, I've lost my chameleon, now what? Which I do have that video, but I hope you don't have to watch it. So make sure they are supervised and make sure they're not able to get to an area where you can no longer access them. Make sure any other pets are put away, that your chameleon is in a safe, supervised space, which is why I recommend that you put them onto some sort of plant or tree or something like that to make things simple and easy. A common mistake that I see is people will take their chameleon out all the time. They're like, well, he just wants to come out, so I just let him out all the time. Well, that's cool, but not cool. And the reason why is we spend so much time, so much money making these little micro environments for them, and that's with consideration of temperature, UVB, humidity, all that to be exactly what a chameleon needs. Now, if we take them out of their enclosure into our home, they're no longer getting that proper UVB, temperature, humidity, etc. And so that can have negative implications if you're doing this over and over every single day for prolonged periods of time, right? So I would recommend, if you're going to free range your chameleon, no more than like twice a week for 1 to 2 hours. That seems fine to me. And if your chameleon is wanting to come out all the time, maybe consider reviewing your chameleon enclosure and care to make sure everything's set up correctly, because sometimes they do that when they aren't comfortable in their homes. Also, males around the age of like 9 to 12 months tend to seek out mates or females, so they get super antsy and want to come out of their enclosure. And chameleons are creatures of habit, so if you've built the routine of them constantly coming out, then they're going to expect that and want that. So you just kind of have to be the bad cop there and just leave them in their enclosure and let them be. Now, to take free ranging to the next step would be to take your chameleon outside. The reason for this and why it's beneficial and something that I'm recommending is because that natural UVB is nothing but beneficial for your chameleon. We're using artificial UVB, but if we have the natural sun, then your chameleon is able to get that directly from the source, which is amazing, right? But there are additional things we need to keep in mind when taking our chameleon outside. And I did do a whole video on tips and tricks for taking your chameleon outside and talk about this in more detail, but just at a high level, we need to make sure that the temperature is not too hot and not too cold. And you need to be very familiar with what the signs are of an overheating chameleon and a chameleon that's too cold, because it can be detrimental for their health. But if you can stay within that like high 60s, to high 70s range, that is perfect for your chameleon. And also keep in mind wildlife when we're taking our chameleon outside. Make sure, you're supervising them at all times. A bird's not just gonna scoop up your chameleon. It's happened before. And what's also happened is chameleons just taking off. And the trees are getting too high, or you turn away and then they're gone. I know chameleons are slow and predictable, but when they want to move, they've got some speed behind them, so don't underestimate how far and how quickly a chameleon can move. And the third and final way that I think you can provide enrichment for your chameleon is to feed them flying food. So yes, we feed roaches and worms and crickets and all that good stuff, But the benefit and the cool factor, the wow factor of having a pet chameleon is that crazy tongue, which allows them to eat flying food, which is what they do in the wild all the time. So what you can do as a chameleon keeper in captivity is actually hatch out different flies and moths, and that's going to be all the things that you're feeding your chameleon anyways. A waxworm can turn into a wax moth. A silkworm can turn into a silk moth. A black soldier fly larvae can turn into a black soldier fly. You can get blue bottle fly larvae and turn them into blue bottle flies. Hornworms into hawk moths. You get the idea. Right, there's tons of different bugs that you can feed to your chameleon that turn into flies. So I think this is a really great way to provide enrichment. It's a bit of a challenge for your chameleon, for them to try and hunt down the flies. Plus it's wicked cool to just watch them go and get those flies. So if you're wanting some advice on how to hatch out the flies and moths, most of them do hatch at room temperature. The worms move into a pupate stage, a little cocoon, and then they'll hatch out into flies. So if you keep them long enough, they usually turn into flies and moths on their own. What can be a little tricky is trying to get them from the cup buzzing around as a fly into your chameleon's enclosure. So a quick pro tip is I usually pop them in the refrigerator for a couple minutes just to kind of stun and make the flies a little bit cold so they're not flying around, and then very quickly move them and then throw them into the chameleon enclosure, close the door, and then when they start to warm up, then they start buzzing around and then they're all in there for your chameleon to hunt down. You don't necessarily have to worry about trying to supplement your flies or gut load them. You certainly can try, but it's definitely more difficult than with your roaches and your worms and crickets and all that. So I look at it as more as a just like kind of an enrichment fun thing for my chameleons do, more so than a opportunity to provide nutritional value. So I also don't stress about how many flies that I'm feeding to my chameleons because they're pretty small anyway, so don't sweat it. So you guys have it, 3 different ways you can provide enrichment for your chameleon. Let me know what ideas you guys have. I'm always curious what other keepers are doing to kind of keep things interesting. But if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Leave any questions or comments down below. Feel free to also check out in the description box various discount links, merch links, Patreon, all that good stuff. Thank you in advance for anyone who chooses to support me. You can follow Neptune and all my chameleons on social media at Neptune the Chameleon. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day. Bye!